Okay, guys, welcome back to I'm not sure what week it is of online learning. I hope that you are all doing okay or better than okay. And this is just your friendly reminder that make sure that you are all practicing self care. Make sure that you are all taking time for your mental health. I know some of you are trying so hard to graduate, and I am, you know, my heart goes out to you, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that everything goes well for all of you and you are able to graduate. Um, and if there's anything that I can do to help set your minds at ease, please never ever hesitate to reach out to me. I just wanted to say thank you so much for all of your patience with me the last couple weeks. You know, I needed last week to be easier, and I appreciate you guys kind of going with the flow. So thank you. And before we get into the lecture, I just want to say that I hope you're all taking care of yourselves. And I can't possibly repeat this enough. If there's anything I can do to offer support, please do not hesitate to reach out. Okay? So, anyway, we're going to skip through the beginning of this lecture a little bit. I'm going to go very lightly over the main points of each slide. Try not to take too long because part of this lecture we did cover in our last all hands on deck class Zoom meeting. But that being said, if you need the review, it's here. If you missed anything, it's here. So, okay, let's just get started. So, this chapter really talks about different levels of engagement, right? And the three main things that this chapter aims to teach you how to answer is, how do you make your audience aware of the content that you have created? How do you make your audience aware of when and where the content can be found? And how do you get your audience to be excited about the content? But the chapter kind of goes zigzag to get to its point because it starts off talking about how to sell your film to an executive, right? And it's very ambiguous what kind of executive we're talking about. So for your sake, imagine that we are either talking about a network executive for the sale of a TV show, or we're talking to a studio executive for the sale of a film, right? And now you are the person spearheading this film project or this TV show, right? And you are going to go sell it in essentially what can be described as a pitch meeting, because what your first goal is going to be is to get some kind of money to make your project happen, right? So, in essence, the first question we're asking is, how do you do marketing for other executives, right? And the answer is that, honestly, direct-to-consumer marketing and business-to-business marketing are very similar, okay? So the idea is that you need to create some kind of a layout of your project to bring it to your executive, whether it be a network or studio executive, to sell your idea, right? And you're selling the idea in exchange for funding to make your idea, in the hopes that your idea will make you and also the executive you're selling the idea to filthy rich. So the way that the book recommends going about talking to what would eventually be the distributor as a network or studio executive is to talk about the category of the project, the production or distribution partners that might have already signed on to the project, any on-screen talent that has already signed on to the project, that whether or not there is a verifiable audience, whether or not there are budgetary expectations, a time frame of delivery, or a call to action. So what is a category of a project? Well, we're used to talking about almost all visual content as being part of some sort of genre, right? We know drama and comedy and action and horror, right? But when you're talking to studio and network executives, you want to actually be much more specific, right? So just saying that you're trying to sell a drama is not enough, right? Because they're going to ask you, okay, well, what kind of drama, right? They're going to start asking you these exact same questions. So it's better to, start the conversation with a much more specific description, right? So instead of saying to a network executive that you're there to pitch them a drama series, right? You can tell them right away, is it a serialized drama, right? And when we talk about serialized drama, we're talking about something like Law and Order. A serialized drama is one where it's a serial show that has, basically almost no ongoing plot episode to episode between the repeating characters, and mostly focuses on the plot of each episode from beginning to end. So Law and Order SVU, Law and Order Criminal Intent, although Criminal Intent got a little bit fuzzy. A lot of the Chicago PD, Chicago Fire, Chicago whatever, Med, those are all serialized dramas, right? Then there are non-serialized dramas, and that you're looking more at something like Grey's Anatomy, or Scandal, or anything where the character's drama, a character-driven drama, is going to be more focused on the main cast of characters and what goes on between them, right? So right away, saying that it's a serialized drama or a character-driven drama is going to give your executive, right, a much clearer picture of what they are buying from you, right? And then you can add additional details. Like you can say that it's a cast-driven, character-driven drama, right? Like let's say that you got a huge name like Rob Lowe, right, attached to your script, right? Then that's a big thing, and you want to lead with that, right? If you're talking to a network executive, that's one thing. If you're talking to a studio executive, you can also throw in things like, this is going to be a TV movie drama, right? It's going to be a movie that is made for TV. So automatically your executive knows it's going to have a smaller budget than a movie that is made for theaters, right? It means that it's right away, it's a B-level movie, a smaller budget, it's going to be easy to produce, right? You could also say that you've got an indie drama, and an indie drama is going to be super cheap to make. The problem is that with a lot of indie dramas, the risk isn't worth the reward. Most indie dramas are independent because they are from unproven talent, and so they have to sort of do the whole gauntlet of film festivals to sort of prove themselves before they're able to get distribution deals. And so common questions that distributors like network or studio executives will ask are, what kind of a product will this be? What marketplace will it need to serve? What market need will it serve? How much will it cost? And who will pay to see this, right? So when you're walking into a network executive's office with your cast-driven, serialized drama, right? They're going to right away basically ask, do I even need a serialized drama, right? Like, congrats to Dick Wolf for signing this huge deal, but the market's already flooded with his content. So unless he's planning to end one of his other shows or several of his other shows, right now there are almost too many Dick Wolf serialized dramas. We know exactly what we're getting from his production. And so if I was a network executive, I would maybe veto taking something like that on if I already have something like that airing, right? Same thing with, maybe none of you watched Gossip Girl when it was popular on the CW, but I'm sure all of you have heard of Gossip Girl from the CW when it was popular. And it was a big deal, right? And the CW had a bunch of shows like that. They had Gossip Girl, and they had Everwood, and they had some other show like that. It was a bunch of rich teenagers doing a bunch of rich teenager stuff, right? And it was very melodramatic, right? So if I'm walking into the CW network executive's office and I'm about to pitch them another show with a bunch of rich teenagers that's going to be melodramatic, it could go either way. They might say, yeah, that's basically our bread and butter. It's all the content that we produce. Or they might say, are you kidding me? We already have 3 shows like that. We don't have space for another show. You're going to be a Friday night show, right? So you have to know who you're selling to. So that's what marketplace need will it serve? You really need to know, right, where that breaking point is of offering something fresh to an audience versus offering something that the audience didn't ask for versus offering something that is tried and true versus offering something that an audience is sick and tired of, right? You got to study what it is that you're selling and decide whether or not now is the time to sell it and who it is time to sell it to. Right? Obviously, every network executive, every studio executive is going to want to know how much is it going to cost and who's going to pay to see this, right? There's a really great marketing and app design lecture that I can post for you guys to watch. And the idea behind it is it's a woman who learned how to design apps without actually knowing any code, right? And she says, look, the trick is to not put in a bunch of work into something until somebody has promised you that they're going to pay for it, right? Don't add a feature to an app if you can't give me a guarantee that someone has said to you out loud, I'll pay you to add this to the app, right? So it's a very, very similar principle with network executives, right? Until I know that an audience wants to see something, I'm not really going to want to buy it because I want to make sure that I'm going to get paid for it, right? So distribution or production partners, right, is the next question, right? So if you have a third-party company that's already supporting your project, you can list that if you think that that's going to benefit you. But you have to make sure that it's a done deal. You can't just say, oh, this company's considering or this company is interested in. You have to know for sure this company has signed contracts. They're definitely working with you, right? So that's one thing, right? And when does a production or distribution partner come into play? Well, if you're trying to get money, you might have already had some sort of seed money to begin with, right? To get to where you are. If you wrote a screenplay and your best friend's boss's nephew's like really into it and they're like, hey, I have a bunch of money, here's $1 million. It's not enough money to make your movie or make your TV show, but it's enough to make a sizzle reel or make at least some important phone calls and get you in a room with a network or studio executive, right? And so then you're saying, okay, well, I already have this person and they've already donated money basically to my project. So they already have a contract with me and they are supposed to be considered an executive producer on our project. That's our trade-off or something like that, right? But you got to make sure that if you mention that to a potential network executive or a studio executive that's considering working with you on your project, only if there's contracts signed, right? For a pre-buying client, it's reassurance that for a client that is buying a show that hasn't been made or buying a movie that hasn't been filmed yet, working with other production or distribution partners might help set their mind at ease, knowing that other people have been convinced by your project, right? Or in absence of co-producers or production companies, you can highlight other successful projects that were done by the same group of people. Right now, you have Onward from Disney that just came out. And the same team that worked on Inside Out worked on Onward. Now, Inside Out didn't do super great, so Onward's not going to do super great because their box office run is done in the middle of COVID. So that's going to be rough for Disney, right? But the sale of Onward, the idea of Onward came from the same team that did a somewhat successful film already. So they're going to put that in to the sale of the show, of the film, right? And then auteur theory conveys a filmmaker's reoccurring visual style or thematic approach. So basically, you can say like, okay, look, from the writer who wrote Shawshank Redemption, right? Like a famous, amazing film, so well written, great twist, right, to the film. You know what you're getting from that film. So you're hoping that the person who wrote that screenplay is going to be able to write another gem. The problem is that, sometimes you just write one good movie. And that happens. So, but having had a success already is a great selling point for your film, right? Okay, so I'm not going to show you guys this video. You can watch this video on YouTube. But basically what this video talks about is how David Fincher has a very particular style of directing where he follows his subject and he makes his actors rehearse and rehearse and rehearse every single movement. Hey, Jake Gyllenhaal, are you going to pick up that glass when you stand up every single time we run through this scene? Are you going to pick that glass up every single time? Yes? Okay. Then show me how you're going to pick it up 100 times. Because what David Fincher does is he studies the movement of his actors and then he follows that movement with the camera. And what he does is he focuses on details with that movement, right? So if I were to bring a screenplay to a studio executive and say, look at the screenplay, imagine David Fincher directing this film, right? They know exactly what they're getting from David Fincher. David Fincher rarely makes a dud. So now you're looking at the screenplay, and as you're reading it, you're imagining different scenes and how David Fincher is going to film those scenes, right? It's a huge, huge selling point. It's not necessarily that David Fincher has even agreed to direct your film, just starting by saying imagine, right? Now it's on the studio executive to get you David Fincher, essentially, right? If they buy the screenplay. Okay. So on-screen talent is another huge attribution that you can consider when you are, oh, that's neat. I didn't know that I animated that. Okay. So on-screen talent attachments are another way that you can sell a film, right? So have you ever watched a film and said to yourself, gosh, that actor seems like another actor? Well, imagine that when the film you're watching was being sold to an executive, right? It's possible that a specific actor was named as sort of the reach of what you want to see in some role, right? So I'm going to go with an obscure example right now, but if you're not sure about the movie I'm talking about, I recommend just Googling the title so that you can see the actor I'm talking about, right? There's a film, Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets. Just believe me that exists. Valerian and a City of 1,000 Planets. And they cast this actor, right? And this actor, he's got a small wiry frame and floppy brown hair and like translucently pale blue eyes and a pointy nose and very pale skin. And is anybody else right now picturing James McAvoy? Because I'm describing this other actor, but actually I'm also describing James McAvoy. And here's the thing, this actor looks like freaking James McAvoy, right? Like this is definitely who they wanted to cast when they wrote the screenplay or when they were selling the screenplay. And then you know what? That is not who they got, right? Because anyway, just Google it. Believe me on this one thing, right? So here we've got sliding back into view these actors from this show on Netflix, Virgin River, right? And all of these actors almost look like somebody famous, right? But the main one I want to focus on right here is this guy right here. Gosh, I hope you can see my cursor. Okay, let me see if I can draw. Okay, check this out. Yep, perfect. This guy right here. Tell me it doesn't look like Patrick Dempsey, but guess what? It's not Patrick Dempsey. And the thing is that is weird, right? But it's not Patrick Dempsey. And so the deal with that is, can I clear this now? Great. So the thing is when Virgin River was being sold, they were like, hey, you know what? Shonda Rhimes just killed Patrick Dempsey off of Grey's Anatomy. He's probably available. Maybe he's interested. I don't know. Right? But then Patrick Dempsey wasn't interested. And so they had to cast somebody who looked like Patrick Dempsey and had the feeling of Patrick Dempsey, but isn't Patrick Dempsey. And that's kind of how casting decisions like that get made sometimes. I told you guys it was late at night and I was going to be a little bit loopy, I think. So a strong cast with recognizable names and faces can make a project pop. And often a strong cast converts audiences, right? Like obscure random actor that looks like James McAvoy wasn't a huge draw. James McAvoy, huge draw, right? James McAvoy is acting in more serious stuff like Split now, though. So there is also that. And also remember, and this is also kind of going back briefly to our David Fincher conversation, name talent is not limited to actors. You can also have a director, a cinematographer, an editor. You can have the score be written by someone that is famous, and that can make all the difference for an executive, right? So creative talent attachments to consider, right? So not all marketable talent is on screen. You can have an award-winning writer, a cinematographer, a director, an editor. And, you know, I kind of want to open it up to those of you who didn't answer my question already on Zoom. You know, think about it. When you want to go watch a film, you know, how do you decide you're going to go watch a film? Do you have a favorite director that no matter what, you're going to go see the movie? Do you have a favorite editor where no matter what, you're going to pay attention to all the little edits that they make, right? This is all things worth considering, right? Okay, so you want to make sure that there's a verifiable audience, right? Or at least it's a huge selling factor. So if you're making a movie based on a popular children's show or a popular children's a popular children's book series like, I don't know, Harry Potter, you know that there's an audience built into Harry Potter. So if you're going to go make Harry Potter related content, that whole audience is going to come watch, right? And now that all of us millennials are older, what you're looking at is an entire almost 2.5 generations of Harry Potter fans that will go and watch blindly whatever Harry Potter fodder gets put out by Universal or whoever, just because it has Harry Potter in the title, right? And so that's a verifiable audience, right? Sonic the Hedgehog had a verifiable audience. Detective Pikachu had a verifiable audience. Detective Pikachu is actually a really great example that I'm going to unpack for a movie that I have not seen and kind of sort of low-key refused to see. Sorry, not sorry. Okay, so Detective Pikachu did two things at the same time. They probably thought that they had a huge movie on their hands, right? So the first thing that they had was Pikachu. Pokemon is huge, right? There's so many people that are interested in anything Pokemon related. And at the same time, Ryan Reynolds is coming off of a huge success on Deadpool, right? So Ryan Reynolds is bringing his own audience. Pikachu is bringing its own audience. And obviously those two things together are going to be huge, right? And I don't know. They did not convince me, even though I liked Ryan Reynolds on his own and Pikachu on his own or her own or their own. I just was not convinced. Still haven't seen it. Still not going to watch it. It looks dumb. Right? But a verifiable audience is a really, really great draw for an executive that is considering giving you money, because a verifiable audience is how they get their money back, right? So, cell format that has already succeeded in other countries, that's a verifiable audience, right? So often we don't see a whole lot of crossover from international television to US television. The most we've seen are some reality shows that have crossed over from other countries, and also some sitcom styles, right? So everybody knows that The Office was originally a UK office, and House of Cards was originally a UK series, and a lot of actually popular TV originated as a UK series, and then that was successful in the UK, so it got transferred over to a US audience. And even still, The Office, the UK version, flopped in the US. They had to completely recast it and completely repivot the premise of The Office into something that was more digestible for an American audience, right? You can use ratings and production history of similar programs. So you're looking at superhero movies are sort of waning right now, right? We've got the Avengers wrapping up, and Marvel not really putting out a whole bunch of content right now. Actually, probably not super smart of them, but they're not. And so, we're actually sort of in this middling ground, right? So before we had superheroes, we had supernatural characters, vampires and werewolves and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type characters, right? And witches and wizards, right? So when that was at its peak, every studio, every production company, every network had some version of a film or a show that revolved around that theme. And then it started to wane, and Grimm was sort of the last of that. Grimm and Enchanted and Once Upon a Time. And then we've started to see an uptick in superheroes, right? And so then Avengers and all of the Marvel films and the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe really took over. But if you really look outside of that, you will see that a lot of other non-Marvel related content did pretty well for itself, right? Including even weird, stories like Brightburn, right? Which is like evil Superman. It was a tested and proven formula that superheroes were going to be popular, and people are taking superheroes postmodern now. And we're going to see what the sort of next evolution is going to be, right? You can do adaptations. We already covered Harry Potter. Nothing, mind-blowing there. Nothing earth-shattering. And you can also tap into existing fandoms. Sometimes a fandom is bigger than the thing that we are a fandom of. Never mind the tea kettle beeping in the background. So, an existing fandom of League of Legends the fandom is bigger than League of Legends itself. And if we were to make a film about League of Legends, the fandom would come, right? Because they like what they like. So, you can mull this over for a little while and think of other examples of how it's fairly easy to get a verifiable audience into a movie theater. So what are the budgetary expectations? Well, we kind of gleaned on this earlier, but the real assessment of budget is to estimate how much investment is required for the acquisitions executive, and based upon other factors such as when the release windows are and cast and partners, and what the margin of revenue is required to generate a reasonable profit. So the bigger the investment, the larger the profit needs to be. Yes, Avengers Endgame was an exquisitely expensive movie to make, but it was also the most watched movie in the history of movie releases. It blew Titanic and Avatar out of the water, right? So, whatever executive signed that made out gangbusters because there was a huge risk, but not really. And the reward definitely outweighed it, right? The financial reward. And so for example, if we were going to talk about concrete budgets, a made-for-TV feature will cost $1.5 million. This is a larger TV feature, like let's say a Christmas budget, right? And that's because Christmas movies tend to try and cast once A-list, now B-list actors and actresses to try and get the audience draw, right? Whereas in distributed on a major network like Nickelodeon or the Disney Channel, you might have a budget of well over $5 million for yet still a made for TV movie, right? So you're looking at Halloween Town on the one hand, and you're looking at, you know, I can't even think of bad Santa related puns right now. Whatever. You guys get the point. Those are concrete budgets, right? And then you're looking at is, comparing that to the $100 million plus dollar budget, $200 million plus budget of some big action films that require a lot of CGI. You're looking at a huge expectation, right? To make a lot of money. And most movies are not going to get that kind of a big budget, but it's also unlikely that you're going to get that big of a reward. Really, I mean, the goal, the dream is to film something for $10,000 and then have it, go international and make all of the money, right? Time frame of delivery, right? So what is the production schedule? Is there a firm start date? Is there a schedule of how long the production will take? Is there a dedicated end date? These are all things that, from a business management perspective, executives are going to be considering, right? Now, this is a really good time to point out that when you're talking about a distribution deal, when a network is buying a TV show or a movie, right? It's not very often that they buy them directly from the writer, director, or producer of that project, right? Oftentimes, a project is being developed by a production company, right? So let's say J.J. Abrams has his production company, Bad Robot. Bad Robot is going to work on something like 25 to 50 projects over the course of a year, right? Some of the projects are going to be super involved. It's going to run the entire span of production, the entire line, right? From the writing to the pre-production to the filming to the post-production, right? All the way through to distribution. And some of the projects they're going to have less of a hand in, right? Like maybe they're just being hired to just do the color correcting and CGI on a project, right? But ultimately, they are tagged into somewhere like, let's say closer to 35 projects in a year, right? So now they've got these 35 projects. They're going to go to distributors and they're going to try and sell those projects. They're not going to sell them as one-offs. They're not going to come to an executive and waste the executive's time by trying to sell one project. They're going to go in and sell bundles of projects, right? They're going to say, look, in 2021, we've got a major drama that has 2 top billed actors in it. We've got a, horror comedy with 4 top billed actors in it. And we've got, 5 films in production that have untested, talent. It's new talent, right? It's rising star talent. They're not sure things yet. And then you're going to say, okay, and then I've got another 10 projects, and these 10 projects, they're made for TV. And that's okay, right? And then what the executive is going to do is they're going to look at the whole scope of all of the projects that J.J. Abrams production company is working on and say, okay, we will, we really want, these 2 big movies, but we really don't want that many, terrible movies. So, how about we do 2 big movies, 3 middling movies and 5 lesser movies or something like that, right? It's impossible for a distributor to know how all of those movies are going to do, right? So in this way, they're also spreading the risk, but they're also spreading the reward. And And yeah, so anyway, so the main thing that you need to be aware of is that the time frame ties into these production and distribution deals, right? So I'm coming to you and I'm saying, look, I've got these two big A-list movie star movies coming out this year. One's going to come out in May and one is going to come out in September, right? As an executive, I'm automatically, well, actually, that's not even how it would work. If I was going to come to an executive, I would say that I would be done filming by December 2020. And then I would be done filming by May of 2021. And then the network executive would set release dates for Labor Day for Memorial Day and then for Labor Day, because those are going to be 3-day weekends. They'll draw a bigger crowd, right? So the time frame of when is the dedicated end date of production is important, because then that determines when I can release the project to an audience. And knowing what the schedule is of how long the production will take will tell me how long am I going to be paying all of the people that are involved in putting this project together, right? How many weeks of production should I expect to be putting these actors and actresses up? How many weeks of production do I need to be paying for a director and a camera crew and a lighting crew and camera operators and all of these other components, right? So the shorter the production schedule is, the less money I will blow through, in order to get to my end project. And is there a firm start date? Well, the firm start date is important, because if it's not a firm start date, that means that the project is not as close to beginning production as maybe the producer is making it sound to be. And the reason why that's important is because if the project isn't as ready to start, then it's going to take longer to get started. And that means that it might stretch out the production schedule. That means that it might not be done by a dedicated end date that I'm being promised right now. And that's going to be a problem, because that means I have to push the release date. And it happens all of the time, but it's definitely something that executives want to avoid, obviously. Yeah, and so then, again, going back to knowing who you're selling to and knowing what you're selling. Well, if you happen to know that you're selling a project to, a network or to a studio that doesn't have anything coming out for a while, is gonna make your maybe slightly less interesting project significantly more interesting to the buyer, right? If I am a studio executive and I have a gap month and my studio is not releasing anything in October, and I have a random movie that wasn't super expensive and happens to be ready in October, well, heck yeah, let's pick it up, right? Because some money from some ticket sales is going to be better than nothing. And your movie might get a better marketing budget all of a sudden. Your movie might get better budget overall all of a sudden, just to make it look better, because this distributor needs something that conveniently fits into their distribution schedule, right? And then, okay, so the book describes this call to action, right? The call to action is rubbish, right? The call to action is that je ne sais quoi of why would somebody want to pick up a film over another film, right? And who the F knows? Honestly, like, this guy sounds like he's very self-important. Whoever the author is of this book sounds like he thinks that he knows a lot, and I believe him that he does. But the call to action is that the executive was in a good mood and decided to take on your movie versus the executive was in a bad mood and decided not to take on your movie. The executive liked the way that your hair was styled, so they wanted to spend more time talking to you than if they didn't. Whatever, right? Like, you can't possibly pin down what that call to action is going to be. From a financial perspective, a call to action is going to be like, gotta get this movie in before the buzzer, right? Like, I'm shopping it around town. But the honest truth is you can't really do that, because usually in order to shop something to anyone, you're going to have them sign some sort of NDA. So it doesn't really matter. Anyway, believe there's a call to action. Don't believe that there's a call to action. honestly, it doesn't freaking matter. If you hit the nail on the head with all of the other factors leading up to this, aren't going to have a problem selling your product, right? So presentation is a huge component to selling something to an executive, right? Think about this for a second, right? They're a network or studio executive. They did not get to where they are without liking visual stimulating imagery, right? Like obviously they like TV shows, obviously they like film, otherwise they wouldn't be where they are, right? So a good starting point is a pitch deck, right? A pitch deck is essentially a PowerPoint, and you put together information into the PowerPoint that makes your movie seem like a good idea, right? Um, Things that you can put in this PowerPoint are the log line, or just the one sentence description of your script, um, images of the actors that maybe have already signed on to be part of your film, um, clips or outtakes from work that these other actors have done if they're not known stars. Maybe if you have a signed on director already, maybe some of their work, etc. Right? So a pitch deck can contain all of this stuff, right? A mood board is like a pitch deck, but it's more visually focused, right? It's going to just be like, here's a picture of Patrick Dempsey because I think the main character should be Patrick Dempsey. And now when we talk about the main character, the executive is going to picture this picture of Patrick Dempsey. It's going to work in my favor, right? You can bring in a script or a treatment, and that's fine. Usually if you're sending in actual content like a script or a treatment, you're going to have the executives sign NDAs. And then, the executives might have you sign some similar contract that also, limits your ability to show this content to other studios or whatever, right? So as soon as you start talking about sending concrete data like a script, it becomes kind of like automatically you're going to involve some sort of level of I can't think of the freaking word, guys. It's the middle of the night and I'm lecturing to my laptop and I can't think of the word contract. Okay. So as soon as you have some real content like a script going back and forth, you're going to start looking at having to sign some minimal contracts to make sure that you're protected, but also that the studio is protected. So you don't want a studio executive to read your script and be like, this is a really great idea, but we're going to pass on your script. But then, call in an in-house screenwriter and be like, yo, write this idea that I just happen to have pop in my head, right? They can't do that if you signed a non-disclosure agreement with them. Cool. So under the table deal making, right? Yeah, it's, everything is made on a handshake and a soft agreement, and then it goes from there. So, it needs to be a section in the book because you're going to go to a business lunch and you're going to talk to somebody and be like, yeah, send the script over. And then you do, and then that's how things happen, right? So marketing as a sellable attribute, right? You've got a couple of things to consider. So now I just want to make this clear. So we're moving from talking about how to sell your concept to a distributor to make sure that you can actually make it, to now we're talking about how to start pivoting selling your content to an audience, right? So how are we going to convert the stuff that you have into a sale, right? So one thing is preferred placement. The placement of a leading actor's name on the poster of a film, or a placement of a title on a digital platform's landing page is not random. Those are done based on preferred placement deals, right? So the new Eliza Schlesinger sketch comedy show It's Netflix's new big thing. They're so excited about it, and it's getting preferred placement within Netflix, right? It's why popular on Netflix now and trending often have the same content. But they're written based on different algorithms. One is preferred placement, one is based on the algorithm. But if you see that something is suggested in preferred placement, you click on it, and then they're getting the statistics that somebody watched it. And so, then the question is what came first. Anyway, preferred placement is something that you can negotiate. Minimum marketing commitments. So, going into making a deal on a budget for a film or a TV show, you need to make sure that the marketing budget is being included into the overall budget. And you also want to make sure that there's marketing reserves. Because often what happens is that inevitably the market is unpredictable, and people suddenly search for the title of your film and blow through your entire budget in 1.5 hours because of something that happened, right? So, not to get dark, but for example, when I think it was the last Star Trek movie was supposed to come out, the actor who played, I think, Scotty, passed away in a freak accident, right? So Star Trek had a marketing budget, right? And because we talked about paid search marketing at the beginning of the semester, you will all understand this. So they had a marketing budget. Let's imagine that it was $10 million. And of those $10 million, some amount went to paid digital marketing, right? And that means that every time that Star Trek, whatever, was searched for on Google and an ad popped up and got clicked on, the Star Trek marketing team had to pay for that, right? And it's all automated. It's not like somebody has to drop quarters somewhere, but you guys get the picture, right? So now all of a sudden this actor passes away. The last thing this actor did was act in the Star Trek film. All of a sudden, people are searching for the Star Trek title over and over and over again. And because they're looking for information about the actor's death, they're clicking on this ad and they're clicking on this ad. And you're basically looking at the entire $10 million marketing budget being sucked dry within a 24-hour period of everybody searching for what happened to this actor, right? So you have to make sure that you also have reserves, because this happens at least once on every single marketing campaign. So you want to make sure that you always have reserves. An extra budget set aside, an extra $5 million to cover this budget, because what happens is if that actor passed away on a Saturday, your marketing team is out until Monday. And if you don't have somebody very careful tracking your marketing budget, guess what? If they spent all of the marketing budget by noon on Sunday, and you're not checking your budgets again until 8 o'clock on Monday, between noon on Sunday and 8 o'clock on Monday, every single time somebody searches for the title of this movie, you're paying out of pocket, right? So you have to be really careful. You have to make sure that when you're hiring your marketing people, that you are hiring somebody that knows what they're doing, but also always make sure that you have a marketing reserve budget. So great. So now we're pivoting to consumer-facing marketing. So unlike the business-to-business model that focuses more on assuring the potential of an acquisition to executives, now we're talking about direct-to-consumer, which is more emotional and more about making noise and getting people excited and building hype, right? So the first thing you want to do is build or identify your audience. The second thing you want to do is schedule a targeted release date. And then the third thing that you want to do is convert your audience into engaged end users. So here's how you do that. So to build or identify your core audience, this is not going to be super different from how we discussed identifying your core audience previously, right? Approach with a wide scope of marketing tactics. Basically, you want to do as wide of a sweep of every possible marketing tactic as possible, right? billboards and posters and flyers and Google ads and ads on Facebook and ads on social media in general and pop-up ads and ads on other websites, right? Like everywhere. You want to hit the entire digital marketing network with your ads. You want to hit the entire physical, living plane with your ads, right? Because what you want to do is you want to run a bunch of different campaigns, right? So if you are, doing a drama and it is a show and I don't know, you cast Rob Lowe and I can't remember her name, but whatever, you cast Rob Lowe in your show, right? You're gonna be casting a wide net for your genre, right? If you liked 911, you're gonna like 911 Lone Star. If you liked Law and Order, you're gonna like 911 Lone Star. If you like Chicago Fire, you're gonna like 911 Lone Star, etc., right? So those are all people that like serialized dramas, and they're gonna like your serialized drama most likely as well. But you're also looking at people who have liked Rob Lowe. Rob Lowe is a film actor. Rob Lowe is a TV show actor. He's been in The West Wing and did a dramatic role. He's been on Parks and Rec and he's done a comedic role. He's doing a reality show right now. So now he's got a serialized drama under his belt as well. And so people are going to tune in just to watch Rob Lowe, right? So who likes Rob Lowe? Well, you're looking at the elder millennial, right? You're looking at people who are going to be just past that peak audience age, right? And you're not quite 18 to 35 anymore. You're looking at like 35 to 50 age range. People who were young when they watched St. Elmo's Fire in the 1980s. They're going to be watching it for Rob Lowe, right? And then you're also asking yourself, well, who's the target demographic for Law and Order or Chicago Fire or whatever? That's going to be also our demographic as well, right? And then what you do is you launch hundreds of campaigns, right? You run A/B tests on all of your campaigns. What imagery works best? What word choices work best? What layout works best, etc., right? And then when the A/B tests start to come back and you start to see what's working and what's not working, you start cutting all of the dead limbs. If it's not working, stop spending money on it, okay? And then you want to augment and support, right? So if you see things, as a marketer, you want to make sure that you are aware socially of things that are going on and you are keeping track of your product, right? So non-film related, but I'll give you guys an example of a marketing team not keeping track of their product. There's a competitor to Groupon called Gold Star. And the day that Santa Clara went into lockdown, Gold Star sent an email to Santa Clara residents that were signed up for Gold Star with tickets, discounted tickets to events for the next month, right? So because marketing can be so niche and can be controlled on a zip code by zip code level, a sign of a bad marketing team is that they did not turn off zip codes that were on lockdown to not receive that marketing. Does that make sense? Because those events were all canceled, right? It was just nonsense email and nonsense marketing. And now I'm just mad that I had to look at this email, right? So when you are looking at what is working and what is not working, right, you also are keeping yourself aware socially of what is going on in mainstream culture, because you don't want to commit some sort of marketing faux pas in the middle of what could otherwise be an extremely successful marketing campaign. Schedule a targeted release date and make the core audience aware. So at some point, you're going to stop just ambiguously talking about the title of your film and start giving out hard facts about when the film is coming out, right? You might already know when the film is coming out when you even start your initial marketing process, but it's good to keep your audience expecting and waiting to find out when the film will come out, because building anticipation is a huge component to marketing and sales and playing on your audience's emotions. So if you're, working on the second installment of the Frozen series, you're going to want to tease your audience for a good solid month of trailers that don't tell us when it's coming out, so that when it does come out, you've created news, right? Now people are waiting to find out when is Frozen 2 coming out. Now, inevitably, some newspapers are going to, or blogs or whatever, are going to pick up information like when the release date is going to be, and they're going to post it, and it's going to be newsworthy, and then that generates free buzz for you, right? That's free advertising for you. So right now, the next big project that I'm personally really excited about is the new Dune reboot, because they, I think, literally cast every single A-list actor that I could possibly imagine all into one movie, but mostly Jason Momoa. And there is no release date for the Dune film. It has just barely started filming, right? And because you already have an embedded audience that likes Frank Herbert's Dune, because you already have an embedded audience of people who like the previous versions of filmed Dune, because you have people who are huge fans of the actors and actresses that are already on this film, working for this film, the anticipation for when Dune is going to be released is huge. It's huge, right? And so when they release that date, it's going to be a big deal. Another similar adjacent example to film and television is video games, right? The launch date of Cyberpunk 2077 was huge industry news within the gaming community, because they spent like 7 or 8 years teasing their fans with Cyberpunk before finally announcing the date that it's going to be released. Then they even ended up having to postpone it, but that's not necessarily the point I was trying to make here. My point being that picking that release date, choosing when that release date is going to be for a film is huge. And teasing it to your audience can generate buzz. It can give you free advertising. It will make your movie newsworthy. And the more times you can get your movie title into newspapers and in front of eyeballs, the better it is for you, right? So a release date that has been well planned can hurt or help a film, depending, right? So if you think ahead and you think about the timeline of when DVDs and Blu-rays and video on demand is going to go on sale, you can time it backwards from there to pick a good time to release your film, right? So if I want my film to be the film that gets bought for Christmas for every little boy and girl, I'm going to release it on DVD and video on demand around Christmas, which means that the movie itself needs to come out sometime around September at the latest, right? Because we still really like having that gap between a film ending its movie theater run and becoming available to watch at home, right? And the reason for that is because having missed out potentially on going to see it a second time, or having really enjoyed it in theaters and wanting to experience it again, builds over the course of a timeline, right? And so then once you have the movie available, you are more likely to go buy it because you want to experience it as soon as possible, right? Summer is big for big budget releases. The fall months are good for dramas and series dramas. In the fall, you always see the newest TV series, dramatic TV series starting off. And really, if you are a smaller budget film, if you are an unknown talent film, then the post-Christmas and New Year's Eve sales time is a really great time for your film to be released because there's not so much competition. There's not a lot of films being released. There's not a lot of new shows starting in January or February. So it's a good time to get your movie out there if you don't want a lot of competition. So the next thing is you want to convert your core audience into engaged end users. And the way that you do that is to get them in the seats and watching your film on opening weekend. And opening weekend is such a big deal because the sales from opening week and opening weekend can help determine whether or not more audience members will go. If a movie is number one on opening weekend and I did not see it, or you did not see it on opening weekend, you as an audience member are more likely to go see it the second weekend if it was number one on the first weekend, right? If it's number one multiple weekends in a row, it means that you're going to maybe want to go see it more than once, right? So the more encouragement there is for other audience members to see a film, the more likely it is that they will, and then the more money you will make ultimately. So the second, third, and fourth weekends can see returning audiences, and then that timeline can really help you build up towards better sales. Okay, now you're in charge of marketing a film. What's your marketing toolkit look like? Well, titles matter, right? It's the yellow pages effect. So now that we have video on demand and it's super popular, a lot of menus sort movie titles by title. And so if you're in the, A and B category or the number category, your movie title starts with the number, you're going to be closer towards the front of the list, which means that, eventually we all get tired of scrolling through and want to just pick something to watch, right? So the yellow pages effect is why you have so many businesses that are called A1 this or A1 that or triple A this or triple A that. And the reason for that is because you want to be at the beginning of the yellow pages, because who's going to flip through 500 pages of yellow pages to find that one car mechanic when triple A car mechanics is just so great sounding and right there on the first page. Titles also matter because sometimes they're just horrible, right? So the original title for Star Wars A New Hope was Journal of Will's Saga 1, The Star Wars. And ultimately they went with Star Wars A New Hope. And thank goodness for that, right? So titles matter because we care about the semantics of language, even though we pretend we don't. You can socialize a show or a film, and I'm literally for real going to talk about the Tiger King for a minute. Okay. So the last time that I saw most of you face to face, none of us knew that the Tiger King existed. And then all of a sudden, I'm willing to bet that most of you have heard about the Tiger King. And if you haven't watched it, you have at the very least seen memes about it. And that's what socializing the documentary did. Instead of spending a lot of money on an ad campaign, they spent a little bit of money socializing their show, right? Not just getting people to talk about it on social media, not just getting people to talk about it, but also integrating it into our social and cultural flow right now, right? So we as a culture like to make memes, and the Tiger King became pretty meme worthy, right? And everyone knows who Carol Baskin is, and everyone knows who Doc Ansel is now, right? And we've all seen all the memes, and I am just disappointed in myself that I didn't start this lecture with, what's up, you cool cats and kittens, right? So they socialized this documentary, right? Because really, if we were not trapped in our homes right now, being forced to watch the content that is available, I wonder how many people would have actually sat through this documentary. But we did it, and it's like a social moment in US cultural history, okay? The other thing that you can do is you can spin something, right? So you can tap into previously unexpected audience demographics by pivoting the way in which you talk about your project, right? So let's say, we go with the example from the book, you make a documentary and it's pretty one-sided and it's fairly liberal, right? You can take your documentary, post a link to it on some conservative websites and say, oh, can you believe the stuff that they're spewing over there in the liberal half of the internet? And people will go and watch your documentary just to understand what it is that they don't like about it, right? And vice versa. If you have a documentary that's more on the conservative end and you go and post a bunch of links on liberal websites, like, can you imagine what these conservative people are talking about in this documentary? And you're going to have the same effect. And so that's one way to spin your product. And the key here is that you don't lie about it. You just get an untapped audience to watch it, right? And also finally, artwork and imagery have a huge impact on how well your marketing content does. So it's tried and true, and I'm sure all of you are aware that the two most popular colors used on basically all of the big movie title posters are blue and orange. Blue and orange contrast each other. They are an appealing pairing. They work well together. And so, you're going to see a bunch of movie posters that are going to be blue and orange, and that's great. It's pretty easy to find examples of terrible movie posters, although most of those examples, if you were to Google for some of them, are going to show you examples of poorly designed movie posters. And while that sucks that they were poorly designed, from a marketing perspective, the more important thing is, does the artwork and imagery, and not just movie poster, but even just the image that you see when you flip over it on Netflix or on Amazon, does it convey the genre, the tone, the cast? Does it indicate the degree of general conflict that's driving the storyline? If you're not in the mood for a serious, World War II Holocaust drama, and you pick a movie that has, a guy on a unicycle laughing, and then you start watching the movie and it turns into a horrible, horrible, dark tragedy about the Holocaust. Well, how could you have possibly expected that from a movie that is called Life is Beautiful? With a happy guy on a unicycle on the poster, right? So it is really important that your artwork convey that general information about your project, right? The book also talks about something called the rise of YouTube influencers, and the author talks about how briefly in Hollywood, there was this idea of including YouTube influencers, but I'm sure I'm sure that we're honestly talking about just internet and social media influencers at this point. But to get them into small side roles like Stan Lee in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, inconsequential roles where their acting skill is not as important, just to get their fans to cross over and watch the movie, right? But the thing that the author doesn't mention that sort of takes away from his epiphany here is that we've been doing this for decades already on niche genres. It's rare to find a sports movie that doesn't have an actual athlete in it. In fact, for a long time, especially in the 80s and 90s, it was hard to cast actors that knew how to do a sport. And so you were casting mostly athletes to fill in all of like the auxiliary roles, and then just the main actors were cast with body doubles to do the sport. And same thing with musicals. We've been casting singers to act for decades. 100 years, since the beginning of film and television, we've been casting singers to act instead of actors to sing, right? And you get Barbara Streisand in a film, guess what? Her entire Tony award-winning audience is coming with her. You get Julie Andrews to sing in your film, guess what? You have the entire fandom of anyone who has ever loved listening to Julie Andrews sing watching your movie all of a sudden, right? So this is not groundbreaking or earth-shattering that we're using YouTube influencers, but it does say something about our society and our culture that we've gone from Barbara Streisand to, Emily Ratajkowski being the people that we're including in films just to get that audience. And then finally, the book talks about metrics, right? So mainly the two metrics that you're going to want to look at are the theatrical box office metrics and the Nielsen ratings. So from a theatrical box office perspective, you need to understand that net profits equal box office sales, and gross profits, that should be an equal sign, box profits equal box office sales minus the cost of the film. So if you're making a deal, you should always try and negotiate for a percentage of the net sales, because you might make $250 million net worldwide, but if it cost you $200 million to produce the movie, you really only made $50 million, and that's not really great at all, actually. So, if you put in $250 million, you're hoping to get back $1 billion, right? But, and this is important, if you are negotiating a contract and you get a percentage of net sales and the net sales are at $1 billion, you're getting 10% of $1 billion. But if you're getting a percent of the gross sales are 750, you're only getting 10% of 750. That's still a lot of money, but it's not as much money as you could have negotiated for if you'd gotten a deal for the net profits. Anyway, opening ticket sales metrics, like the zip code, age demographic, or gender of your audience can help direct further marketing actions for subsequent weekends. So if a movie comes out and it's doing really well in, urban areas, then marketing is going to repivot to spend more money on the zip codes where the movie is doing well, and zip codes with similar demographics to where the movie is doing well. Whereas if it's popular in the suburbs, they're gonna pursue those zip codes instead. Same thing if they're seeing that overwhelmingly it's one gender over the others choosing to go see the film, then they're gonna pivot the marketing to fit that gender. And then, as we discussed earlier in this chapter, opening weekend sales are huge for, subsequent weekend sales. So marketing is going to be working really hard that first weekend to make sure that all of their content is hitting the right audiences and getting in front of the right people's eyes. Okay, so Nielsen ratings mostly focus on TV, whereas in theatrical box office obviously focuses more on film. Nielsen ratings, they've got audience share and audience rating. Those are the two main sort of metrics that you need to track for Nielsen. So the audience share is a total percentage of viewing households actively watching or receiving the broadcast signal of a specific program. Okay, so out of all of the people who have TVs on that are watching something, what percent of those people are tuned in to watch my show? What's the share of the total audience that I have? Okay. An audience rating is the percentage of viewership against all households actively or inactively viewing. So the percentage of viewership against everyone that owns a television. Okay. So if 100 million people have televisions and 70 million people have televisions that are turned to a specific signal of a program, then what you're looking at is that 70% is the audience share. Okay. Now, if 200 million people own a TV, 100 million people have the TV on, and 70% or 70 million people have the TV tuned to a specific broadcast signal, that means that it's 70% or 70 million out of 200 million. That would be the audience ratings. The audience share would be 70 out of 100 million. Okay, great. So that is the end of the lecture for chapter 7. I hope I didn't go on for too long. I know this was a little bit rambly and I definitely talked a little bit too fast. If you have any questions, I'm going to be available in my I'm going to be available during our new Zoom office hours, which are going to be during class time. A word to the wise, if no one logs in, and I've been in the chat room and the Zoom room for like over an hour and no one has logged in, I'm going to log out. So if you're trying to log into the meeting for office hours and it's for some reason telling you I'm not there, just send me an email. I'm probably still available, but I just don't like sitting there with my laptop turned on. Don't take it as like a sign that I'm not willing to be here for you guys. I totally am. I just, yeah. So that's one thing. I'm going to try and get the next video out before Wednesday of this week for you guys. And if there's any kind of feedback you have, like, Olga, please don't talk so fast, or Olga, please stop rambling. Maybe things I don't already know, but if you have any feedback, please let me know. I'm open to improvements. There's a reason why I teach how to be on camera, but I have never actually been on camera because I hate being on camera and I hate talking into a camera or even just into a microphone. It's kind of bizarre trying to teach to my laptop. Anyway, so I hope you guys are all taking care of yourselves again, if I didn't emphasize that enough before. And I hope that you guys are getting this lecture. And like I said, just let me know if there's anything I can do to improve the lecture experience, or if you're fine with the lecture experience, but if there's something else that I can help you guys out with, just let me know. Anyway, this is Olga, and I'm done talking now.